Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Real Barriers to Housing. This is a webinar brought to you by Align Minneapolis as part of an ongoing effort to educate and create awareness about the homeless experience in Minneapolis. Align Minneapolis is an interfaith collaboration of 18 Minneapolis congregations, along with persons with lived experience of homelessness, working together to address homelessness. We were established in 2008. We were known then as the Downtown Congregations to End Homelessness. And we focused on immediate and long-term solutions through education, advocacy, and direct work with persons impacted by homelessness. Our vision is that everyone has access to safe, decent, and affordable housing in Minneapolis. We believe that if we really understand what our brothers and sisters experiencing homelessness have to deal with, then we as allies will be in a better position to advocate for the policies and laws that bring remedy to their situations. So I am your host, John Cole. I am the interim director at Align Minneapolis. And I'm delighted to have you join us. Whether you are a supporter of Align, or you are just becoming familiar with us, on behalf of our organizing team, I welcome you to this hour, which is dedicated to focusing on the real barriers to housing. Tonight, we have several ministry leaders of Align member congregations who work directly alongside persons experiencing homelessness. And I will introduce them to you, and they will wave hi to you. First, we have Mary Martin. Mary is the director of the Dignity Center at Hennepin Avenue United Methodist Church. Then I'd like to introduce to you Michael Griffin. Michael is the director of social ministry at St. Olaf's Catholic Community. Then we have the pastor for community ministry at Central Lutheran Church. We have Melissa Pohlman as well joining us. We also have two members of Street Voices of Change, Stephan LaSure and Earl Wembley. They'll be joining us as well. Street Voices of Change empowers persons who have current or past experiences with homelessness to come together, to invest in and empower each other to build a loving community that recognizes the trauma of homelessness and seeks to restore dignity in every aspect of the experience. Its goals are to share and pass knowledge to those still experiencing homelessness, to educate those in power to hear the voices and experiences of the homeless, and to advocate in creating positive change in the homeless arena, and to foster empathy and break down stigmas for those experiencing homelessness. And finally, to transform those experiencing homelessness to find and keep stable housing. Then we have our friend of Street Voices of Change, Sam Smith. Sam is the Public Policy Coordinator for NAMI, Minnesota. NAMI is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of children and adults with mental illness and their families. And for over 40 years, NAMI has worked to promote the development of community mental health programs and services, change public attitudes about mental illnesses, and improve the access to services and increase opportunities for persons for recovery. So these are your panelists for tonight. We're talking tonight about the real barriers to housing. And I just wanted to say that we're approaching this from the perspective of persons who are experiencing homelessness. That is, persons who are living in shelters or may not be in shelters and therefore are unsheltered, or those who may be couch hopping, staying with family or friends, but do not have their name on the lease. For many of us, when we think about the housing process, we think about setting about going to get a house, getting housed, we think about accumulating funds and getting a real estate agent and being able to negotiate with a bank and get financed. And that is how we go about the process of getting housed. But the folks that we are talking about tonight can't get into home ownership. Housing for them would be either getting market rate apartments, public housing, transitional housing program housing, or Section 8 housing. These are the options that are available to them for the moment. But I want to say that every step of the way is fraught with challenges. A simple process of accumulating funds can be a challenge. Getting good paying jobs, or where do you store your money when you earn it? How do you save it? Especially if you're a member of the informal banking sector, because a lot of persons experiencing homelessness do not have bank accounts. And a lot don't have any knowledge of where places are available. So it is a challenging proposition when you think about trying to find housing. And so we're going to delve into this a bit more in our discussions tonight. And I'll probably start with Michael and asking him about his observations of what he has learned in leading ministry at St. Olaf's in assisting persons who are experiencing homelessness.
Well, thanks, John, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of St. Olaf Catholic Church, first of all, we're really proud and honored to be part of this collaboration, because like everyone gathered, we find the current conditions simply unacceptable, but we also know that we can't advocate as individuals or even as one community. We need to do this across the whole community. And so the strength in numbers and the support and energy that comes from that really makes a difference. Having said that, I think that the daily observations that come to mind as John posed the question and sketched out what we're about tonight is just the image of there's simply oftentimes no place to go. That might be as straightforward as on a given day, all the shelter beds are taken, so even seeking shelter means there's no place to go on that given day. Given the elements, even being able to be outside there's simply no place to go when it's wind chill or raining or snowing or whatever the case may be. The other reality is even if someone builds some momentum, and it takes considerable momentum to move from the experience of homelessness beyond, as John sketched that out, to have the necessary resources, oftentimes that the layer of housing that needs to be available, there's simply no place to go. There's not enough of it. And what's there might be in such poor condition as to leave it undesirable as that next rung, that next place to go. And so I think that image of not having places to go, and then on top of it, for these last many months, as we've experienced the pandemic and still try and keep our doors open at the church and to be able to provide whatever services we can, um, the limitation of places to go for respite, to warm up, to cool off, depending on the time of year, is simply an unacceptable piece that there's just no place for people to go. So I think it poses the challenge for us to say, how do we expand the places for people to go? How do we expand and strengthen our services, especially during this pandemic time? How do we expand the resources necessary to support those moving from the experience of homelessness into housing? Those that need supportive services to be able to do that and to maintain that um, will will take a cross community effort for us to be able to continue to do that. So I think that's the image that's a constant. It's one that we face every day, that our doors are open, trying to help serve people in need. And it's also become a reality as we as a church community, we're in the process of trying to develop about 240 units of affordable housing on our small campus right downtown. And there's, in a sense, almost no place for us to go to easily find resources to finance that. So even when we have the will of our community and a willing partner in a housing developer, and the desire to make a difference based on the people that we serve every day, the challenge to develop even 240 units of affordable housing also makes it difficult for us to even have a place to go because of the lack of resources, or the resources that are there are strained. If we wanted to build luxury condos, we'd probably have no trouble finding someone to write us a check and have a place to go for that money. But trying to build affordable housing for members of our community who live, who work, who play, who seek to just simply have a place to call home, we need to make more places for them to go.
Thank you, Michael. And you've laid out for us the very basis of the real situation that folks experience: no place to go, and for a lot, no access to resources. So you spoke about the difficulties in building affordable housing. That's one of the options that are available to persons experiencing homelessness as they seek to get a roof over their heads. But they do have other options, and perhaps we could look at what are the challenges experienced in trying to get into, let's say, transitional housing, get into a housing program, or even into public housing. Maybe would you like to say something about what you would have experienced at the Dignity Center as you serve clients and support clients, participants in the stability program who are trying to get into housing, those types of housing?
It's difficult to get into any type of housing. One of the main problems that we've seen at the Dignity Center is participants getting into supportive housing where the supports aren't there, and that they get in trouble for stuff that being adult. We've talked about that. And then if they're wanting to work and they're in one of those programs, they don't have a grace period. They have to immediately, well, depending on how long it takes for the county or the state to recognize that, they lose their services and have to pay the rent. So that's some of the problems that we've seen with individuals. I know that some of the participants have been threatened with eviction for things that they're not really responsible for. And so it's it's tough. There's not a lot of stuff out there for people to get into, a lot of competition. That's kind of what we've been seeing.
Mhm. And to get into these programs, you have to qualify, and that in itself is in a process, isn't it? And even though even when you do qualify, then you have waiting lists, right? And very long waiting lists for apartments which may not even be in existence. And those are some of the challenges in general that folks experience in when they contemplating even getting into a program so that they can qualify for assistance. We have lots of challenges that we probably might not think of. We spoke about knowing where places are, and to be able to reach out to connect. It needs a cell phone, right? And perhaps Melissa, you could speak about some of those basic nuts and bolts challenges that folks experience, the difficulties they experience as they try to navigate the system.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about some of that. My experience walking alongside of folks has been oftentimes the technology barriers are very high for applying for places. And that's already, we're not even talking about supportive housing or transitional programs at that point. But because you have to actually have a person who helps you get into those, right? You have to have a housing case manager, you have to have a way onto coordinated entry. You have to know how to navigate that system that is a very professionalized system that is designed to let professionals help people do that, but not designed to let people with their own agency enter into that, right? So then on top of that, oftentimes, especially during COVID, folks want to do all that kind of application process, all the background checks, everything online. And right now, access to computers, access to the internet, access to all of that stuff it's been tightened. You no longer go to the library. You can no longer do computer time there. You have to make sure that your email is working. You have to make sure that your email passwords are all correct, that you haven't had your email hacked. Anyone had their email hacked? Yes, right? Like all of those things that you deal with generally, when you deal with them and you don't have a solid place to sleep every night, makes it that much harder, right? And then we do have folks in the community for whom they are just struggling with literacy in general, or they're struggling with technology literacy. And that then when everything has to be done online, everything has to require email addresses and all of that, it tends to make the barriers even higher. And especially when oftentimes right now, when you're going to rent an apartment, they don't email you back. So they don't email you back, and then they email you a system, their own portal that requires you to download software on a computer you don't own. The barriers to all of that just stack and stack and stack on top of each other and make it so complicated that most folks don't navigate that system well.
Yes, it really sounds onerous and very challenging. It makes me wonder, so then what are the supports that are available for folks when they're trying to access housing? What is available to them? Who can they turn to? So, Mary, Sam, Melissa, any of you like to take a shot at that?
Well, at the Dignity Center, they have access one-on-one to individual advocates who try to help them navigate through long waits on the phone calls, trying to show them how to remember their passwords, to log into those types of things. And we do have a couple computers that they can use, set up their emails for, and then retrieve that stuff. So that's sort of a support. But we only know, we only have so much access. We only have so much time to be on hold as well. But we do provide an email that a lot of different places can email. We had an individual that was trying to get into a transitional housing, and they kept missing because he didn't have a phone. Right. So that's one of the big barriers. So they would call us on days that we weren't open, and then we would call them and we were playing phone tag. But we finally got connected. We finally got them connected to that. And of course, there weren't beds left at that point. But so there's the supports, but yet we're still limited in what we can do.
Yes.
I would just add to that too, that Street Voices of Change was very, very specific with the county in the last couple of years, saying we need case managers, housing case managers in shelters. So we didn't have any before we started pushing, before Street Voices started speaking their voices. And to say that those case managers also need to be accessible and good at their jobs and good communicators. Many folks have had the experience that, yeah, their housing case manager wasn't on top of things, wasn't able to actually advocate for them in a way that made sense, or was sending them out looking for places that weren't going to work from the very beginning and kind of setting folks up to fail. And that is detrimental to folks' souls, right? If somebody else sets you up to fail, and you've gone out there and you've done your best, but somebody didn't check the details first before they set you up, that is depressing.
Yes, and I know that a lot of our folks have to deal with the trauma of being homeless, because it is a traumatizing condition, and also on top of that have to deal with the repercussions, the impact of the frustrations, the stigmatization, and then the disappointments that come about when they do try to get housing. And I think we will hear a little bit more about that later when we talk with Sam. But right now, I'm gonna ask Stefan to be kind enough to share his experience since we started talking about disappointment and frustration. I think this might be a good opportunity to hear exactly some about what actually happened to folks. And Stefan, if you're kind enough to unmute yourself and to share with us some of what you experienced.
My name is Mr. Stefan LaSure. I'm an original member of Street Voices of Change. I'm an educator. And my experience with housing came at a time when I was in a medical situation. And even at that point, nobody wanted to go out for me to get me a housing. But there was a medical nurse, a homeless nurse, who said, wait a minute, we have to do something about this, after she did an examination. And she said, okay, well, and she went through the channels and got me into the Exodus, which is a 2-year program. And while I was in the Exodus, I watched maybe 40, 50 guys leave out of the Exodus getting housing. So when the Section 8 list came open and the Hopkins housing list came open, my case manager put my name on the list. And he said, hey, you got a hit, man. They want to give you an interview. She's going to write you a letter and, let you know when it's time has come. So I get the letter. We go to the interview. And while I'm at the interview, she said, you're going to fill out the application, even though the Social Security numbers from your Section 8 voucher and your public housing voucher don't match up. I'll give you 2 weeks to go down and get the printout for the Social Security. So we do that. And as we're doing that, she goes through an interview and she asks me all of these questions. Mr. LaSure, have you ever been incarcerated? Yes, I was incarcerated in 1982. I was incarcerated in 1982. And after that, she asked me a series of other questions. And I answered those questions and I signed my name next to the little signature. First of all, I didn't fill out the original application. It came from my case manager. And so after I came back and gave her the social security number that verified the one that I had originally gave her, she accepted the application and told me she would get back with me in 2 weeks. So after 6 weeks, my case manager again contacted her and she finally sent me a letter telling me that I was denied. And as I read the letter of denial, she said, you were denied, Mr. LaSure, because of your lack of information. So I immediately filed an appeal and we go back out to Hopkins and sit down with the appeal with her and the city council lady. And I asked her, what did I not disclose to you? And she said that here's what the FBI just sent me. Here's your police file. And I said, why would the FBI send you 17-page copies of my FBI file? And in that process, I became so confused that I'm looking at the police report and I'm looking at the FBI file and I realized that these are the same charges all the way from 1979. They just used a different language. They said to her, which frightened her, was the fact that these are weapons charges. At that point, my case manager called her and told her to look at both of the copies. You'll see that these were pocket knives that he were caught with, just happened to have an open bottle. So that's a whole new different thing. But the bottom line to that was that after I was denied the second time, it took her 2 months to give me a response after she said 2 weeks. And the second denial said that for lack of information. Now, before we left this meeting, I asked her, I said, are you and the city council satisfied with what I just gave you? You asked me, was I incarcerated? I said, yes, I gave you the dates, the time, all of that. And I asked you, was there any more information that you needed? She said, no, we're fine. And then you sent me another letter saying you're denied for lack of information. And at that time, my 2 years was up. And in the midst of the 2 years being up, what the real confusion was that I had 3 days to get out of the apartment and I had 2 days to go to a funeral in Chicago. So all of my things that I had situated, I had to just throw and take here, take there, and everything just vanishes. And that's kind of a bitter pill to swallow because you have 2 years of rental history. You had no criminal history in the state of Minnesota. And you charging me for a 38-year-old case that I had, that I served time for? That is unthinkable. And those are not the only barriers. Those are the barriers that create other barriers behind that, because becomes the distrust, the disassociation, the depression, and all of those other things that we don't acknowledge. My gift is to educate young African-American men who assume that they're in the right place, meaning mentally. And I spend each and every day that I can standing on 8th and Hennepin. You can say whatever you like. Every DID, everybody downtown knows me. I shake your hand, I talk to you. It's not just for your benefit, it's for my benefit. Because if I'm not comfortable and if I'm not believing in a system that I know don't work because it just showed me that, but if I surrender, who do I become? And that's my thumbs up to Street Voices of Change, because that's my sacred place of peace. I can go there on Thursdays and I can keep all my clothes on, but I can get naked and just sit there and enjoy myself. And that's the blessing that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for the positive approach that you have to in terms of back and to help your brother and sister. It is really a terrible thing that you have experienced. And it's basically reflective of an unforgiving system that continues to penalize persons long after they have served their time and have been released back into society with insufficient support. And more so than that, as in your case, active stigmatization that's heaped upon it. And unfortunately, that's an experience that a lot of us have to share. A lot of persons experiencing homelessness has to go through. I was just wondering, as to the members of the panel, as you heard Stefan's story, if there's any comment that you'd like to make at this time. And I think this is also a good opportunity for me to let those of you who logged in on this webinar to know that if you have questions, you may use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and send questions, and one of the panelists will be happy to respond to you as we go through in the discussion tonight. Stefan has raised for us the whole issue of criminal record and what it is that persons who experiencing homelessness, this is one of the major obstacles that they have to overcome. Mary, I don't know if you'd like to say anything of the challenge that presents, what you've seen at the Dignity Center.
We've seen it time and time again, where somebody has a very old criminal offense, such as Stefan's, and it gets pulled up every time that they go to find an apartment. Even when they have come out and say, I have this record, I haven't reoffended, that it's still held. It's, as Michael had said earlier, at another time, that there's just so many people vying for the so few available spaces that they can be so unforgiving. And I just think if somebody has paid their time, they should be able to re-enter and and get into some sort of apartment. But we see that over and over again as a barrier.
That is true. And there is a process that is laid for folks to, for some offenses, to get those expunged from their record. Isn't that so?
But they have to be Minnesota or a state that allows expungement. And there's quite a few states that don't, will not expunge. And then they can still see the lack of employment or the lack of renting history, and it still comes back to haunt them.
Yes. And so here we have a case of someone who had 2 years rental history, had not been in any way violating any stipulations of release, had paid all his debt to society, and for 11, 12 years had not reoffended, and the first offense being over 38 years ago, almost 40 years, and still still not being allowed to move forward and to be able to establish a dignified life. And it is really a distressing situation that a lot of folks experiencing homelessness have to deal with. And to the point of expungement, the cruel thing is that there are lists, and even if you in 2020 got your record expunged, folks can go back and look at the 2018 list or the 2017 list, 2016 list, and we'll still see those. So,
and one thing, this is Sam with NAMI, one thing that Stefan said that really struck me was when he said that there are barriers behind other barriers. And I think so far we've been talking about some of the institutional challenges that people face, like coordinated entry networking, overloaded case managers. But then behind that, we have some other, really deep problems like systemic racism, a mental health system that was never built, and a human services system that is just always in a stage of crisis, where someone is going from the emergency room to the emergency shelter and then back out onto the streets, and not really providing that sustained and ongoing support, which is so frustrating for advocates like me at NAMI Minnesota. One thing I want us to, talk about the barriers, but also to be hopeful. One program that I'm really excited about is what's called a landlord risk mitigation fund. And this is essentially a small pile of cash that will decrease the perception of risk among landlords who in tight rental markets are going to have a lot of choices. And so maybe they're not going to choose that person on a Section 8 voucher or someone with some criminal history. And so if they're connected with this risk mitigation fund, they can say, well, if they do some property damage beyond the security deposit, there's some unpaid rent that landlord can tap into that risk mitigation fund. Now, I don't think this surprises anyone here, but that fund is actually very rarely used, because I think everyone in this circle knows how precious and important housing is, but it's extremely valuable to engage landlords who frankly have some discriminatory attitudes about people of color, people experiencing poverty, mental illness. And so there are some things we do that can make this better, but right now it's still extremely frustrating. And, I, for one, am, mad and disappointed, but I want us to stay hopeful too.
Yes, we will, and we are thankful that there are some positives in the experience. Yet, we have spent a little bit of time talking about some of the issues surrounding persons with criminal records, and just wanted to get another perspective on that experience to show that it's not all the same. Every person has a unique situation, and the system responds differently to each person, but the outcome is still the same, that of not being housed, or there being discrimination and continued stigmatization. So I was wondering, Earl, if you would care to share a bit about your experience when you tried to obtain housing. It's been an ongoing exercise for you, and I'm sure if you could share just a bit about one of your experiences, that would help us in this discussion.
One of my experiences?
Yes.
Well, I've been homeless since 2004. I went to prison on a wrongful conviction, and that landed me in prison for 9.5 years. When I got out, I was labeled a level 1 sex offender, a sex predator. And it blows me away. but I am still trying to get justice on that. But as far as the housing and jobs, it's been hard. If it wasn't for the handouts and places like the Dignity Center and Peace House and Opportunity Center and the shelters, I don't know what I would have done. My family turned their backs on me, I just found out that I'm banned I have to register for the rest of my life. I'm banned from certain places. I put my name, since 2012, I've been dealing with this housing thing. I stayed in the shelter I had nowhere to go. So I stayed at the Salvation Army for almost 2 years. And then some GRH housing for a little bit, violated for smoking marijuana. That's another thing. I have health issues that the marijuana helps. But I kept getting violated, losing everything after I built up some type of stability in this GRH and shelter life, 8 years of that. And got certificates, programs, anything. Since I still can't get justice, I'm still got to live. So, like I said, I couldn't get jobs, but I had to do little odd jobs here and there. But anyway, I would get on these lists with these case managers, and they would tell me, okay, you're on the list. It may take a year or to 2 years, and then finally get to the year or the time for me to come get the keys to look at the place. And I get there, and they tell me, wait, we got to do a background check. Then they do the background check, and I'm out the door. I'm not eligible. And this happened 3 or 4 times in the last 8 years. And so I got to the point where whenever I had a case manager, if they come to me with an apartment, I say, my situation, don't even put me on the list if you know I'm not eligible, have me wasting my time. And, but again, there was one of the barriers, and then I got to deal with folks that want to keep up trouble, which is really easy for someone with this label on them. And I don't see how other folks do it, but I know God's been with me, and I've made it through a whole lot with this child molestation crap on my back, even through prison, all the way through to today. I had to fight for my life, man, because not everybody knows me, and a lot of folks believe in the system and believe in what they put on the screen. So I am dealing with this crap every day. But like I said, things have worked out. I've been, through the midst of all this, I've met someone of, St. Olaf's, the Exodus. Everywhere I've lived for at least 2 years know me and have been very respectful and nice to me, even in prison. Staff there, everyone that has gotten to know me have. And I don't think none of the places could tell you that I've harmed anyone in all the time that I've lived 2 years at the Salvation Army, 2 years at the Exodus, a year with Affirmation House, 9 years in prison. You can go talk to them folks and see ask you what Earl did to harm anybody in 16 years. But I have these barriers. I have the state telling folks that I'm one thing and I'm not, but they don't know until they know me and talk to me. So, and I guess I speak for a lot of folks that's got this label on them. They don't, where can you go? You can't find a job. They don't, I did 10 years in prison. I got out, I didn't even know how to turn on a smartphone or turn a computer on, and with $400 in my pocket. Yeah, but I'm supposed to get out here and and make a living. And I've been trying to get my disability for the last. I can't even have an income to even. I did find a landlord that wanted to accept me. I've been on GA for the last 8 years.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate both you and Stefan for sharing so bravely of your personal stories with us. Um, Folks who are attending and watching this, and all of us here on the panel, truly blessed by your sharing and the insight that you've allowed us to have, and we're thankful for you. And it is sad that it is a reality, as I said before, in an unforgiving system that makes no provision for persons upon reentry into society. And to be at a point where, having paid your dues and satisfied the criminal justice system, you still being re-victimized every day, not being able to work, not being able to stay, and to be able to get a place where you can peaceably have your existence and make life for yourself. It is a terrible situation, and one which we hope to find ways and means to remedy, because that is what we are about here at Align Minneapolis, and in trying to understand the situation, but also to come up with solutions for some of these things. Sam, you hearing all of this, it must be particularly distressing on top of the traumatizing experience that is the due of anyone experiencing homelessness. What can you say from a mental health perspective to persons going through this, and what options are there for them?
Thanks for that question, John. And I think it's always important to remember, when someone needs help, that help is there. Whether that's a suicide prevention lifeline, if someone's really in trouble, contacting the COPE team in Hennepin County to provide some crisis response can be potentially a really valuable thing. But, one thing we've learned is it's hard to take care of your mental health when you don't have a place to call your own and a place to stay at night. And so, the options like permanent supportive housing and getting the mental health supports to allow you to succeed in your housing plan is also extremely important, and something we're working to do as much as we can to expand those resources. For people looking for support at NAMI Minnesota, we offer a number of support groups, including those that are offered online via Zoom during the pandemic, and are happy to connect folks with other resources as well. So please look to NAMI if you need support for your mental illness.
So we have talked a lot tonight about the barriers experienced, mental housing, in transitional housing, getting into programs, exiting programs. We have talked about the barriers that exist in being able to navigate the technology required now, and even the system, even if you know where something is at. We talked about the stigma that follows people and the discrimination that attends that, where people in this renters market are turned down and denied. I'm so just wondering from all of you here, if we could fix things, make some sort of invention, wave a magic wand, and to put some things in place that will address some of these issues, what would you like to see implemented? What would you do? And just feel to jump in. And if anyone of you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we'll be glad to respond as well. So, solutions?
One of the things that we had talked about at one point in time was, and that folks had advocated for and got passed, was the ban the box on job applications. So that's not, they can't ask that question right away. Are you a felon? Do you have a felony? Do you have a criminal conviction? That in the state of Minnesota, you can't have that on the front page of your job application any longer. I wonder if we couldn't do something like that, whether it's city or county or state-based, for rental applications, to say straight up, that's not the first thing you get to ask people. Because knowing Stefan well, knowing Earl well for years, if I was a landlord, I'd rent to them in a second because they're fabulous individuals who are incredibly responsible and bring real assets into a community. Now, if the only question I have for them is tell me about your criminal background, then I'm going to assume lots of things that are not true about both of them. So if I don't have to start there and I start with what assets do you bring? How are you going to pay your rent? Like, then the opportunity to actually rent a place might happen. That's just one of the things that we've talked about as solutions.
Okay. Mary?
I don't know. I always dreamed that there'd be that grace period for people that have gotten into supportive housing to be able to get into market rate once they have a better paying job, building a nest egg that would then allow someone else to move into that supportive housing. And have it be that transitional time so that people could get themselves stable, their mental health going, their ability, building that, their credit history, and then be able to get that job, store that money, move into a different housing of their own, more market rate. So I don't know why the system has to be so punitive. So that's one of my dreams, I would think, is that we would encourage people, give them an incentive to move into their own housing.
And the import of what you're saying is that when right now, when you're living in GRH, you cannot accumulate funds, right? Unless and if you do, you're kicked out of the system. Is that the thing?
There you go.
You turned it on?
I turned the video off.
Sorry, you're not kicked out of the system as much as you now have to pay for that. You don't have an opportunity to build up that first month's rent and your damage deposit because you're now paying for the place that you want to move out of.
Okay.
Or in a case, a lot of individuals.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're thinking about dreams. Michael, do you have any interventions that you would like to see brought on stream?
Well, I think in our incredibly divided, polarized time, amazingly, criminal justice reform seems to be one area of some possible bipartisan effort, both at local and state and even national level. And so I think it's an area where we have some very specific reasons because of some very specific people that we'd like to see reform done. And I think it might be a way for us to advocate across the political divide and get some traction. That certainly happened with the Ban the Box effort on employment applications. And I think incremental change of a bipartisan fashion, which will be necessary in divided government, might also be possible to be able to continue in that regard. So I think the earlier call for hope I do see some hope and some opportunity. It'll take a lot of work, and it'll take continuing to build relationships. But I think being able to share the reality and share the stories, like what's been tonight in our webinar, will help us build on that reality and build toward that hope, and hopefully continue the incremental change that will be necessary, not only in reforming the criminal justice system, but in our case for tonight, to the implications that has for people being able to secure proper housing for themselves.
Yeah.
And this is Sam, and I just want to agree with Michael that the types of solutions we're talking about here are very possible and something that we can all accomplish if we work together. And I know I've felt so lucky to be able to partner with many of the people around this circle. NAMI Minnesota is a member of the Homes for All Coalition, which is working every day to build more homes and support the services that enabled people to transition from homelessness into housing and even to home ownership. And so together we are going to be advocating to drive these solutions to build more homes, so that when people experience homelessness, it's brief and short, and they're back and connected with the supports they need. And more inspired than ever, listening to the stories from Stefan and Earl to deliver on something I think we really need to make a promise to every Minnesotan, that homelessness can be a thing of the past.
Thank you. We have two questions. I think we've started to answer them. One was, if we don't have a background in social work or law, what ways can someone help in advocating for changes? And the other ones, the other question is, what efforts have been made to approach Minnesota legislation about the positive economics of increasing housing, employment, education, housing, mental health care, versus paying for not doing this?
I can start with that first. That great question from Emily. And what I would say is that your story is always right. There are policy experts that can have all sorts of fancy degrees in statistics, and those things are helpful. And I don't mean to diminish that, but your personal experience and story is always right and valuable and has a place in the legislative process. And because it happened, and it's real, and it's important. And a lot of the numbers and statistics that have been put together, they don't always align with people's personal experience. And that really matters. And that's why it's so important for us to hear from you. And so I'm excited to hear that you're ready to get involved. And what I'd say is, you've got all the tools you need to be a really effective advocate.
Yes, certainly. And if you're being here in this webinar, you have your email address, and we certainly will be in touch with you, providing opportunities that on things that Align is working on in terms of advocating policy, and for policy changes. From time to time, we send out action alerts, and this will help in keeping you abreast of things that we're working to make changes in the situation.
So John, I'd like to just suggest, coming out of tonight, we just finished an election. Our state representatives and senators are now in place. And whether you voted for your state senator or representative or not, a note of congratulations, thanking them for their public service, and being able to tell in a couple of paragraphs what you experienced from this webinar, and maybe being able to just say, this is something that you'd like to see for a better Minnesota. You don't have to have all the policy bullet points. You don't have to have any other detail, or know that your particular representative is on a committee even that might do something about it. But being able to convey, as was earlier shared, the story of your experience, even tonight, in a note of congratulations and thank you for your public service at this time before the session even begins in the new year, is another step, another way to share the story and your experience of tonight and any other places that you've drawn from, and being able to put that into the process would be a great, simple, and straightforward and easy step coming out of tonight.
Thank you, Michael. And we have a suggestion, an idea from Lynn, in terms of what could be implemented. He said universal vouchers for housing for all, based on income, not program rules of exclusion. Thank you, Idea Lynn. Is certainly something we will take on board as we solutions for addressing challenges in housing. So I think we have come to the end of our time together. I want to thank each and every one of you who've taken the time to join us for this webinar. We're trying to get to issues around housing. I want to thank each and every of the panel, thanking Earl and Stefan, Michael, Mary, Sam, and Melissa for all that you do, both in Street Voice of Change and in your various ministries. We really appreciate that even in this time of challenge, fraught with many obstacles, there are lights and there are positives that exist, and there are people out there who are trying to help. And for you who have joined us on the webinar, we invite you to become allies of Align. That will enable you to receive a monthly newsletter, first one coming out in December, and also to receive action alerts. That way you will be able to follow through on all that's happening, what we're working on, and the role that you can play. So thank you very much for joining us. We will be continuing to have more webinars as time comes on, as the organizing team works on coming up with issues. If there's anything that you would like us to organize around, please let us know. If you have any suggestions for topics that you'd like us to go into, please be sure to let us know as well. And we'll be glad to do that, as this is going to be an ongoing exercise for us. All right, so thank you, one and all. And it was good to have this discussion and to be a part of it.
Thank you. John?
Hold a bit, Stefan. Hold on.
I just wanted to say something.
So folks will be leaving now, and then the panelists will just stay for a bit of debrief. It'll be good. So I'm not sure if you were able to read the chat while you were going on, but there were some comments there that were shared. I want to read. Thank you, Earl, for sharing. Earl, you are a blessing, and I'm so thankful you can share your stories today. It's hard and holy work. Thank you, Earl and Pastor Melissa. Thank you, Central. Thanks to NAMI. Thank you, Align. And then excellent discussion. Let's do this once a quarter. And so we are grateful for all of you. Thank you all, especially Stefan and Earl, for sharing your stories. So the sentiment expressed by everyone. We are going to just have a bit of a debrief now in terms of how did you feel that the discussion went? How do you feel for participating in it?
What were you going to say, Stefan?
First of all, thanks for the opportunity. And second of all, I haven't heard the word educate or re-educate. We can acknowledge that all of the problems, all of the symptoms, but if we don't re-educate, there's nothing there. I hear a lot of people in the streets on a day-to-day basis talk about free. And truth in life, there's nothing free. I mean, those are things that you need in the moment. Those are things that get you by, but they're not free. They're gifts, but they're not free.
Mhm.
And if we don't re-educate young Black men, women, homeless people in general, the public in general, the old guard in general, then the situation will remain the same. And right now it's at 60%. And if we don't get on top of this within the next 2 years with the golden opportunity of a 24-hour shelter to start educating young people that this is an opportunity for you, even though it's a shelter, it's a 2-year program to
Mhm.
where you can prepare yourself to do something better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you, Stefan. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to thank y'all for the opportunity to let me join you tonight. You know, thanks especially to Earl and Stefan for sharing your stories. I thought they were really powerful and really just crystallize why the work we do is so important. And just appreciate the opportunity to represent NAMI Minnesota and help everything y'all are up to. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have to say tonight too, like, y'all know I don't do this very often. Like I'm just straight up pretty teary
Mhm.
because we've been working so hard for so long to have housed people listen. Like,
Yeah.
just listen. And I know especially for Stefan and for Earl, like I know you guys' stories and I know of the intense injustice that surrounds both of you and the facts that you're not housed. And it's not that I want you to have to put your pain out there all the time, but I want things to change. And I know that especially with folks who are housed, some of those folks who asked, well, what can I do next? They didn't come to this webinar thinking they were going to do something next. But they heard your stories and they heard the injustice and they want to do something about it. And I do believe that largely people do want to do good things. They do want to help folks. They do want to see folks housed, but they don't know the barriers. They don't know what you all have been through. And the fact that you could share tonight, it's really hard and it really sucks. And you shouldn't have to. And you were both willing to put your stuff out there. And I'm just really thankful for that. And that's going to sit with me for a long time. So thank you guys.
Mhm.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. It is really very powerful and touching. And you really can't replicate that. There's nothing you can do that amounts to somebody's story.
And I really hope too that for a lot of the folks on this call, again, we didn't get to see them necessarily, but my assumption is everybody on this call that I knew was a white person too. And I hope that this was convicting to them.
Yeah.
It was convicting to them that the systems that we've designed are destroying people.
Yes.
So I hope that yeah.
Mhm. Because folks get up and they speak about issues, but unless they have a real a real story, it really does not connect. It really does not drive. I need to connect with the heart, and that's where the power lies. That will motivate folks to try and make a difference. We certainly will be continuing to shine the light on things like these, and to continue to be of support as we move forward. Jim, I know you have been quietly behind there, managing things. Any input from you?
I echo everything that Melissa said. Earl and Stefan, I am so in awe of you two gentlemen in your willingness to share your stories and the struggles that you've had, and take the time to advocate for not only for yourselves but others with similar stories. You shouldn't have to be the ones to do that, but it's very powerful that you're willing to do that. And I am very, very thankful for you sharing your stories. And at least for me personally, it's motivating to continue doing the work that I do to try to break down and fix these systems and make sure that there's housing available. When I hear the stories that you guys share, and I only hope that at some point when we're not so isolated, that I can see you and visit with you more in person, because I want to learn more about you and get to know you more. And I hope that my experiences, it's not about me, but I hope that what I experienced in hearing you tonight there'll be something in what you shared that will resonate with the participants tonight. That the people who are on this call, the 54 or so people listening, will resonate with those stories too, and join us in this fight. So once again, thank you. And Sam, thank you for your work and for being a part of this and being a partner in this work and sharing your experiences too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and thank you, Jim, for all that you've been doing and just making all of this happen. We will be seeing more of Sam as we go forward. Street Voices of Change will. We're forging a strong alliance with NAMI, and we just hope that it will benefit to us being just healthier people as we go through all that life has to offer, and particularly 2021. Okay. So,
was there anything you wanted to reflect on?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you to. Oh yeah, I'm forgot what I was gonna say, but I was glad to get my story out, and like I said, I appreciate everybody. Past Melissa, I don't know. Just hopefully, folks listen and we'll get some change, some more changes. That's
Yeah.
Look forward to that.
We look forward to that in truth. Yes.
And then, because my job is always the business, we have gift cards for Stefan and Earl for doing this from Speakers Bureau. Yes.
Mm-hmm. We do.
I think I have those gift cards at church. So if you guys want to stop by Thursday morning, I can leave those for you guys. Okay. Or I'll be there Thursday morning. So.
Righty.
Okay.
That was good. Thank you.
I got to put some kid to bed. So I will see you guys later.
Yeah, and thank you, John, for organizing this
Thank
event.
all of you.
You're welcome, Sam. All
Yeah,
right.
that was
Earl.
great.
All right. Thank you, Stefan. Really
Yes, sir.
enjoyed.
Thank you.
It was a privilege to have you. Good night.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.